Hello, I'm Robert Horton. I'm a member of the National Society of Film Critics and the programmer historian in residence at Scarecrow Video. I'm delighted to say that in 2021, I'm once again leading Scarecrow Academy, an ongoing discussion series online in which we are discussing in 2021 the art in noir, film noir, and the director. We're well into part 2 at this point. Although you do not have to have come to any of the previous sessions in order to join us at any time. This would be a good week to join us. The sessions are free, they're via Zoom. They take place on Saturday afternoons at 2 p.m. Pacific time. If you're looking at this thing on the Scarecrow Academy page, or maybe the Scarecrow Academy YouTube page, you should be able to navigate your way to a link that you click on, and Scarecrow will send you the Zoom link so you can join us. Our next session takes place on Saturday, November 13th. For a conversation about Roman Polanski's 1974 film Chinatown. I will introduce the film and its director, or I will try to. Now, many noir films were low-budget productions or B movies, but even the ones that were made by a major studio, like let's say Paramount making Double Indemnity with some big movie stars back in the 40s, even then there was something disreputable about most noir films. We cannot say that about Chinatown, which was a bona fide A picture back in 1974, immediately received as something more than just another crime movie. Released to rapturous reviews, it had good box office, and it got 11 Academy Award nominations that year, although it won only one category. That was for Best Original Screenplay. Chinatown is also unusual in our noir course for that screenplay being an original, not based on a pre-existing novel or some true story or something like that. The writer, Robert Towne, originally wrote the screenplay with his friend Jack Nicholson in mind for the detective. The script was championed by the head of Paramount Pictures, Robert Evans, and he wanted Roman Polanski, who had previously directed Rosemary's Baby for him at Paramount, to direct the film. If there's any one thing that is most famous about the making of Chinatown, the behind-the-scenes stuff, it's that the conflict between the writer and the director of the movie was mainly focused on the ending of the film. Towne had written an ending that was definitely dark in nature, but with some sense of justice being served and the world being righted ever so slightly at the end, while Polanski insisted on an extraordinarily bleak ending in which, we will not spell it out for anybody who may not have watched it at this point, but justice is not at all served. The director's will won out, and Chinatown went on to become a classic. I will not try to sum up the life of Roman Polanski, this film's director, only to sketch it briefly. He was born in 1933, raised in Poland during the Holocaust, a film student and an actor in communist Poland during the 1950s, eventually a celebrated international director really upon the release of his feature film Knife in the Water in the early 60s, a Polish production and a masterpiece of anxiety. He was a success with his first English language films, including Cul-de-sac and Repulsion. He also scored a Hollywood triumph when he came there with Rosemary's Baby, as we mentioned. He also saw Hollywood horror when his wife Sharon Tate was murdered by the Manson family in 1969. In 1977, after Chinatown by about 3 years, Polanski pleaded guilty to, and we quote here, unlawful sexual intercourse with a minor. And after this monstrous act, he fled the country before his sentencing, has been a fugitive from U.S. justice ever since then. He has continued his career in Europe, although his last couple of films have not seen distribution in the United States. Our focus in Scarecrow Academy is on directing style, and we'll look at how Chinatown shows its director. We'll see how Polanski's approach has a kind of complete and almost oppressive meticulousness about it, which is both appropriate to a detective story in which the clues are important to track, but also a hallmark of Polanski's usual style. Chinatown is a very complete film, and of course this has much to do with making a Hollywood studio film at this point, working at a very, very high level. John Alonzo's cinematography, Richard Silbert's production design, and Anthea Silbert's costume design. The music by Jerry Goldsmith, which was, by the way, a last-minute replacement musical track for something that had already been there. Maybe we'll talk about that on Saturday a little bit. Those are all a part of this very high level of craft that you see in the film. And yet, we have to say there were other period films being made by studios in the early 70s that recreated a period and had the weight of studio craftsmanship behind them. We think of The Great Gatsby, for instance, the Robert Redford version, The Sting, which had won the Best Picture Oscar the year before the Chinatown came out, a Raymond Chandler adaptation of a private eye novel, Farewell, My Lovely, 1975. All of these came out around the same time, but all of them are sort of superficially pretty. They have nothing like the density or the beauty or the sinister light that Chinatown exudes in every frame. So we'll talk about how Polanski gets that into the film with his command of the visual plane, and also sound and tone and rhythm when we meet on Saturday. If you're watching this little introduction before you watch the movie, I would suggest particularly paying attention to the way that Polanski arranges people in space within the shape of that widescreen frame. How so frequently the world comes in and out of balance because of how he moves the camera and the people in and out of it. One visual through line is a focus of seeing itself. From the way Polanski gracefully puts us in the point of view of the detective, and I'm not talking about like a literal point of view shot through his eyes or something, but sort of traveling at his side through much of the film, through the repeated imagery that has to do with seeing, with lenses and apertures and frames being very much a constant in this film's persistent vision. Town's screenplay is renowned for the way it connects everything in the script. It certainly does that. The callbacks and the repeated references, from the misheard term Apple Core to the Albacore Club to what we hear about Hollis Mulray's interest in tide pools as the source of life and his eventual demise in one of them, or the repetition of references to Chinatown, actually, and what goes on in Chinatown. This is good basic story construction, of course, for any screenplay, and very appropriate for a private eye mystery in which we are trying to unravel, the whodunit and why. Town's original screenplay did not actually go to Chinatown. That place existed more symbolically in the original version of the script. Polanski insisted that the film go there in every sense of that, and all of his visual strategies coalesce when we get there into the final sequence in truly horrifying ways. I wonder whether Town's ending, which, as we said, was dark, but at least somewhat indicated that justice might be meted out at the end, was a sort of came out maybe out of the 60s, out of the sense of hope and the world possibly changing finally. Whereas Polanski could not see that, and his ending has proved the more insightful one, I think, which the subsequent almost 50 years of time have done very little to contradict. In any good detective film, there is the mystery, and then there's the mystery. And we're going to try to get to the core of the latter when we gather on Saturday, November 13th, for a conversation about Roman Polanski's Chinatown.